Good evening. Our Bible study this evening is titled God's Confidence in You Exceeds the Confidence You Have in Yourself. God's confidence in you exceeds the confidence that you have in yourself. And that is exactly the way the Lord gave it to me. Now, I don't normally begin Bible study with an introduction. I normally use introductions for sermons. But this Bible study was birthed out of an episode in one of my favorite movies, Fighting Temptations. So while I'm sharing this, I want you to turn in your Bibles to Exodus chapter 3. We're going to journey through the first 15 verses for this Bible study. Again, Exodus chapter 3. And I'll move you to verse 1 in just a second. One of the things that I like about the movie Fighting Temptation, as you know, if you've watched the movie, Darren Hill, who's played by Cuba Goodings, comes back home. He's really failed as a businessman and in a lot of debt. And therefore, in the death of his mother, he's moved back home. Darren is recruited, or part of the agreement in the will is that Darren would become the choir director for the local church. His mother was very involved in the church, and I think it was his mother, so don't hold me to it. It's his mother or his grandmother or his aunt. So I guess you see, if you're going to share that story, you should have all the details. But Darren's aunt or his mother or his grandmother. But the bottom line is he goes out and he recruits all of these so-called misfits from outside of the church to become members of the choir. Now, all of these individuals, if you go back and watch the movie, all of them are gifted and talented in various ways. The problem is they are rejected by the church, and maybe not the church as a whole, but maybe I should just say rejected by the first lady of the church. In the movie, her name is called Paula, and they call her Paulina Pritchett, and she's constantly lashing out at Darren and using her husband as well, and on the backdrop, using the church bylaws to keep these individuals out, or rather have these individuals not be participants in the choir. Now, I want to go back because I shared with you that these individuals were gifted and talented, but her rules, the church rules, excluded them from serving. And it was an ongoing effort until they finally reached the end of the road, in that they were ready to perform at the Nationals, which they did win. And it's finally then that the pastor puts his wife, Paulina Pritchett, in place. Bottom line is, when I saw that, probably for the 25th time, I was confronted with the idea and mindset that how many people do you know, or how many people do we know, who have lost confidence in themselves because they feel like they are not qualified, they don't fit in, and they lack the confidence in themselves that God has in them. One of the guys in the movie stands out with a jumpsuit on, I think several of them, but he has a unique soprano voice and he sings. The organist, the other singers, all are individuals that we would call misfits. And even today, I don't think a lot of us would want them on our church roster, okay? Now, you know I shouldn't have said that, but that's the way it really is, if we don't have a mindset of kingdom building versus having individuals that we feel are qualified. So I want to deal with that word qualified. I want to deal with the word approved And then let's go back and look at our subject once again. God's confidence in you exceeds, surpasses the confidence that you have in yourself. I don't think there's other place in the Bible that you can see that more clearly than in Exodus chapter 3 as we look at the calling of Moses. Now, if you have not turned there yet, I'll pause for another moment to let you turn there. Exodus chapter 3, verses 1 through 3. I want to give the backdrop first, and then we'll move forward. You know this story. If you've been around the church for a few days, if you're a complete novice to the scriptures, then this passage should be familiar to you. The Bible says, now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him out of a flame of fire, out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. The Bible says in verse 3, and Moses says, I will now turn aside. Let me look at this sight. In theological terms, we call it a theophany. It is a manifestation of God's presence. God revealing himself to you through something you can see, a theophany. So it was not the bush that caused Moses to turn, but it was rather the features of the bush. This bush was burning but not consumed, on fire but not consumed, on fire but not consumed. Now, that was the thing that God used to arrest Moses' attention, the bush burning. And out of the bush, in just a moment, you're going to hear God speak. And that's what makes it a theophany. Now listen, in order to really understand where we are and where we're going, and we are going somewhere this evening, I want us to look at the life of Moses. Because what I want you to see is how God was preparing Moses, even when Moses was totally oblivious to the fact that God was going to use him in a unique and powerful way. Moses' life can really be divided in increments of 40 years from a baby being found in the river and growing up in Pharaoh's house. Now that's very important. The next 40 years he spent in the wilderness. Our text just alluded to that. In the wilderness in Midian, serving as a sheep herder or a shepherd, 40 years. Then the last 40 years of his life, you are familiar with the fact that he led the children of Israel, as I fast forward and then come back, out of the land of Egypt into the land of Canaan. Though he didn't make it there, it was a 40-year journey of wandering in the wilderness. 40. Well, Pastor Henry, why do you share that? I share that to let you understand what happened those first 40 years. Now, our members hear me say this quite often, and I want to say it again. A few years ago, I was captured by a series that T.D. Jakes did. And T.D. Jakes says there's nothing wasted in the kingdom. And that means that the things that God allow us to go through, the episodes, the chapters, are all aligned so that God could use our past to help us in our future. Our mistakes, our failures, all the things that we've done, and those things that we've done that have been positive. God takes all of those things and puts them together and helps to shape our future and help us to understand that all along the way he was preparing us. So 40 years in the desert, 40 years in Pharaoh's house, 40 years in the desert of Midian, and 40 years in the wilderness. 40. Now, get this. The second set of the increment of 40 is not only God preparing him to be the leader that he was, but it also shows us that he's learning to take care of sheep. Now you got to get that. Learning to take care of sheep. A shepherd takes care of sheep. Later, God will use this same Moses, stay with me, to lead over 1 million sheep according to Josephus and his Antiquities, over 1 million sheep out of the land of Egypt into the land of Canaan. So the shepherding skills are the criteria that God has put in place, the way that Moses would learn how to provide and take care of God's sheep, God's people, the Israelites, as he was leading them out of the land of Egypt. Now, okay, the next passage I want you to continue reading is beginning with verse 7. God has Moses' attention, and now let's see what he says to Moses. First thing God does is he says, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have given heed to their cry. In other words, I've heard them, I know what's going on, because of their taskmasters, referring to Pharaohs and his leaders, for I am aware of their sufferings. That's good. I am aware of their sufferings. That means that God knows what's going on in our lives, even when we think he has forsaken us, and he has promised never to forsake us or to leave us. But he lets Moses know up front, I am aware of what's going on. I'm aware of the bondage and the slavery that they've been under. So he says in verse 8, I have come down to deliver them from the power of the Egyptians and to bring them up from what? From the land to a good and spacious land. Now get this, a good and spacious land and a land flowing with milk and honey. Now that sounds great. A good and spacious land and a land flowing with milk and honey. To the place of the Canaanites, the Hivites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, and the Jebusites. That's what he said. There, verse 9, he says, now behold, the cries of the son of Israel has come to me. Furthermore, I have seen the oppression, he deals with oppression, which the Egyptians are oppressing them. Therefore, come now, and I will send you to Pharaoh, so that you may bring my people, the sons of Israel, out of Egypt. Now, notice God assures Moses he's aware of the sufferings of his people. If you underscore that, he says, I've come down to deliver them from the power of the Egyptians, underscore that, and into the land flowing with milk and honey that is also good and spacious. Now, the lesson really begins right now. I'm going to call verse 10, as I so often do in Bible study, our memory verse, sort of like the verse that is the guiding verse in Sunday morning Bible study. Verse 10. This is the verse that I'm sure Moses did not want to hear. Therefore, come now, and I will send you to Pharaoh. Wow. God had confidence in Moses that momentarily you're going to see that he certainly did not have in himself. Therefore, come now, and I will send you to Pharaoh. If I had been Moses, I would have been startled by the fact that God says, I will send you to Pharaoh. In fact, I would have been bold enough to say, God, did I hear you right? I know you didn't say you're sending me. I'm not the man. You see, you got to see it this way. God preserved Moses' life for this season of his life. Let's go back to what T.D. Jakes said. Think about it. Nothing's wasted in the kingdom. You remember, Moses was the Hebrew baby that was placed in a basket by his mother to preserve his life when all the boys, male children, Hebrew children, because they were expanding too greatly, were destined to be killed. In order to save his life, his mother placed him in a basket in the Nile River. You know the story. And guess what? Pharaoh's daughter is down by the river. She discovers the child, takes the child out of the basket, takes it home. And it is there that she hired Moses' biological mother to come and serve as the baby's nanny, so to speak. Now, if you can't see, I'm almost about to get out of this chair, the hand of God in that, I don't know what you've missed. Preservation. Preservation. At this point, Moses had no idea what God was going to do with him, but he had preserved his life. He should have been taken out. He should have been killed, slain rather, would be the proper word to use there, but not so according to God, because God had preserved him for a specific task. And his assignment that God shared in verse 10, I am sending you to Pharaoh. Now, I know some of you are saying, but Terry Henry, Moses was a murderer. You are exactly right. Not only did he murder a man, but he hid him in the sand. Moses was a shepherd tending to his father-in-law's sheep. So you have a murderer, the low life of a shepherd, and this young boy that had been preserved for, as Esther would say, or Mordecai said to Esther, for such a time as this. Now get this, God says, I am sending you to Pharaoh. Now, it was no surprise to God that Moses had a background. Today, in 2020, we would say Moses was a man on the run, a fugitive, a murderer, a felon. But yet God saw something in Moses that he did not see in himself. And I guess I need to pause here and ask, what is it that God sees in you that you haven't seen in yourself? How can you get the same amount of confidence that God has in you and have that confidence in yourself without becoming cocky or arrogant or feeling like you are more than you think you are? First thing Moses does is the very thing that I would have done. He came back with his excuses. Who am I? Verse 11. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, that I should bring the sons of Israel out of Egypt? Moses had lived in Pharaoh's house. If anyone knew the type of life and the type of warrior and the type of man that Pharaoh was, Moses knew. Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and that I should bring the sons of Israel out of Egypt? Who am I? Now, understand this. The description of the land, back up, sounded great. The Bible says the land was spacious. I'm certain Moses liked that. The land was flowing with milk and honey. I'm certain Moses liked that. And what God had promised in the migration of his people out of the land of Egypt into the land of promise, or the land of Canaan, or what we call the promised land, had to be enthralling. Wow, that's what Moses wanted to hear. But the assignment was the problem for Moses. The assignment. The assignment. In Moses' eyes, he has to wrestle with his own insecurities, or should I say, his own lack of confidence. God had more confidence in him than he had in himself. Now, let's be honest. Don't underestimate the fact that this was a big task and a huge responsibility, leading 1 million people out of the land of Egypt into the land of promise. It would have taken a qualified individual. And in 2020, if we would ask Moses to send in a resume, You know, and I know it would go very quickly into file 13. He was not qualified according to our standards. But guess what? Here's some good news. Not qualified by our standards, but approved by God. Take your highlighter, yellow, green, blue, whatever highlighter you're using, you ought to highlight that. Not qualified, but approved. Not qualified by man, but approved. Excuse me, not man's choice, but God's choice. I could end the Bible study right there because that's enough. But there's so much more that I need to cover. You see, going back to the song that I introduced to you, one of the songs in the movie The Fighting Temptation is, the song says, it seems like I always fall short. I'm not worthy. And this is the way the song says it, because I ain't good enough, but he still loves me. I want to tell someone that's listening, and it's heavy in my spirit. You are approved by God. And you don't have to be approved by man. You are approved by God. Swipe the sweat off your forehead, calm yourself down, and rest in knowing you are approved by God. In 2020, Satan is playing the role of Paulina Pritchard, the antagonist in the movie. She's the one that's always saying, this person doesn't meet the criteria to be a member of the church, and more so a member of the choir. But you need to speak to Paulina. You need to tell that adversary. You need to tell who the Bible says is that accuser of the brethren, that regardless of your past, you are approved. Maybe not qualified, and that's okay, but approved by God. Because God does not call, listen, God does not call the qualified, but he qualifies the call because he saw something in Moses from his birth to mold and shape him into the leader that he would become. And I want to stop right here and let you know you are approved by God. And no, God didn't come along and say, well, I think it's time that I'll call Terry to preach, or I'll call Terry to minister, or I'll call Terry to do a specific task. I'm not necessarily talking about all preachers, just whatever God is calling you to do that's going to take you to another level in the kingdom of God. Get rid of your doubts. Don't listen to the naysayers. You've heard God's voice and you know it. Now it's time for you to get busy doing what God has called you to do. The problem is, Moses didn't have the confidence in himself that God had in him. E.S. Carson, I wish I could take credit for these 5 things that he lists, but they are belong to Carson. And I'm using part of his, and I've added my own thoughts to supplement his thoughts. But if you look at the verses, and if you move further down, beginning with verse 11, as you turn there, verse 11, who am I that I should go? Carson highlights 5 excuses that Moses made. And I guarantee you, if you listen to these excuses, they are more than likely similar to yours. First excuse, who am I? This excuse is based upon Moses' poor self-image of himself. How many of you know of someone that has the potential to do some great task in the body of the church, outside of the church, but these individuals won't come forth because they murdered a man? because they've done something in their past. Wow. And so therefore, they don't feel like they are qualified. And so, rightfully so, he asks, who am I? I know what I've done. I murdered a man. I hid him in the sand. And later on, some men saw me. And they recognized me, spotted me. And Pharaoh found out. And he plotted to kill Moses, to take his life. But Moses ran. And so therefore, looking at his background, he did not feel qualified. Wow. Nope, he wasn't. But if I could send him a text this afternoon, I would say, Moses, you were not qualified, but you were approved. That's deep. Carson said the first excuse was, who am I? He said the second excuse is found in verse 13. And let's look at that. Oh, I connected it with verse 13. He says, what will I say? And let's put in parentheses, and what shall I do? What will I say? What will I do? He said, suppose I go to him and say what you've told me to say. And they ask me, what is your name? Then what shall I tell them? What do I do? Where do I begin? What is my first step? And who am I going to tell them that sent me? That's two excuses. Who am I? What will I say? What am I going to do? All wrapped up into one thing: a lack of self-confidence. God had more confidence in Moses than Moses had in himself. Number 3, we talked about who am I? What will I say or do? What if? Uh-oh, there it is. Now you know, and you and I know we could, what if? What if? We try to think of all the excuses. What if I'm not accepted? What if I am rejected? What if I don't sound like someone else? What if I don't do it like my co-laborer? What if I'm not received? God said you are approved. Put a period behind that. Never put a question mark where God has placed a period. What if? And see, the enemy wants to bombard your mind with a lot of what if statements. I was at my sister's apartment in Silver Spring, Maryland, when the Lord called me to preach, and I made that announcement. And when I look back now, and I've looked back since then, my sister's apartment in Silver Spring, Maryland, was the island of Patmos for me. Yes, it was where God revealed himself to me in a powerful way. That's important. So my sister's place then became the place that God needed me to be for a season to prepare me for the task that he called me to do. What if? And when God called me, the first thing that came to my mind, and those of you who know me and have known me for years know I used to have a serious stuttering problem. And that's the first thing that I said to God. No. What if I can't get my words out? What if I can't articulate my thoughts? What if I don't sound like other preachers? And it's quite strange that the very thing that I struggle with is Moses' top excuse. Moses also had a stuttering problem. What if? What is your what if this evening? What if I'm not accepted? What if I don't sound like someone else? What if things don't turn out the way that I want them to turn out? Am I going to be embarrassed? Am I going to be rejected? Wrestling with these things in my own mind and in my own spirit. What if? I started out asking the question, who am I? In verse 11. What will I say or do in verse 13? And then moving on, 4 and 1. What if? What if? Fourth excuse. Now, you should know, I'm sorry, I should have told you. When you get to what if, you had to open up Exodus chapter 4, verse 1. And then we're going to move to Exodus chapter 4, verse 10. And Moses not even goes on with his list of excuses. His next excuse is, I can't. So far we've dealt with who am I, what shall I say or what shall I do, what if, and now I can't. I haven't tried. I haven't taken the first step. But my question is, what if? This is what he said in verse 10. I've never been eloquent, neither in the past or in the present. I'm slow of speech and tongue. Now, notice what he didn't say. I'll give it a try, like the little train. I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. But I'm dealing with insecurities because in the back of my mind, I can't speak as well as others. What happens when God calls you out of your comfort zone? And that's what he was doing for Moses. And assigns a task to you that you have never done or attempted to do. You've got your degree, or maybe if you don't. Maybe you're just a high school, or maybe you didn't even finish high school. Can I tell you something? That doesn't matter to God. He knows everything there is to know about you, your strengths as well as your weaknesses. And yet, he has approved you for the task that he has assigned to you. Pastor, what is that task? Let's restate it. Verse 10. Therefore come now, and I will send you to Pharaoh. You to Pharaoh. I'm calling you for this assignment. I've allowed everything in your life to serve as stepping stones to get you to this point, to shape and mold you for the awesome leader, awesome individual that you are going to become. And I know you can't see it right now, but you're going to do great things. But you've got to move beyond your I can't. I can't. I can't. You want me to go to Pharaoh? You asking me to do something that I've never done? Because, as the song says, in the movie Fighting Temptation, and I'm stating it the way the song states it, I ain't good enough. Now we know it shouldn't be I ain't, but that's the way the song says it. I'm not qualified. I always fall short. I have fallen short. I've got some dark pages in my past. I've got some scars, like the scar I told you about one Sunday in my sermon where I fell on the heater right here. But all of our scars are not physical. Some of our scars are spiritual things that Satan continues to present before us to make us feel like God is not going to use you. You don't have what it takes. What do you do when God has more confidence in you than you have in yourself? Or to state it the way he gave it to me for the lesson, God's confidence in you exceeds the confidence you have in yourself. Wow. I can't. God told me to tell you, yes, you can. Pastor, how do we know that this is what God gave you? I had something else prepared. For those of you who really know me, it's just me. I'm ahead with Bible study. I'm ahead with sermons. And all I have to do during the week is just go back and add ingredients to the message or the Bible study that I've already prepared. But when God tells me, set that aside, set it aside, and I want you to talk about this. Again, that was birthed in my spirit from having watched the movie. I know that God is speaking to you. I'm pointing directly at you. Let's look at the member verse again. Therefore come now and I will send you to Pharaoh. You. God is calling you to do something that you know he wants you to do. And this is not something new. You've heard it before. It's been spoken in your spirit. It's been prophesied. And God has used other individuals to tell you there is something that God is waiting for you to do. And it's time for you to get started. One of my good friends, and I served as his assistant some years ago, Jeff Batson, used to say, you can't get finished until you get started. It's time for you to get started. The fifth thing, we talked about, who am I? What will I say? What will I do? What if? For I can't. The last one, God is listening as Moses speaks. And he says this in Exodus chapter 4, verse 13. We've gone from chapter 3 all the way through, select verses, and now chapter 4, verse 10. Excuse me, verse 13. 10 was I can't. Verse 13. Please send someone else. Now that was paraphrasing, and regardless, depending on the translation that you're using, the wording may be slightly different, but that's what he's saying. God, could you send someone else? Send Mark. Send Jimmy. Send Frank. Send Mary. Send Ellen. Send Sue. Just send someone else. Send someone that's more qualified than I am, because I certainly don't think I meet the criteria for this leadership position. Let me read verse 10 again. Pastor Henry, have you lost your mind? Nope. I just want you to hear it. I want it to resonate in your spirit again and again and again. Therefore come now, I am sending you to Pharaoh. I know who I'm sending. I know who I'm calling. I know about your past, but I also know about your future. Wow. Pastor Henry, I'm sitting on the edge of my seat. And I've heard you. I've heard the 5 excuses. I've heard you elaborate on each one. Who am I? What will I say or do? What if I can't and send one else? And I want to say yes. I want to commit, even though I know I'm not qualified. But I want to know, did God give Moses any assurance, any guarantees that satisfied the insecurities that he had in his mind and in his spirit? Let's back up. You in Exodus chapter 4. Let's go back to Exodus chapter 3, verse 12. Yes, go back. I'm going to let you pause so you can flip that page back. And God spoke to Moses, saying, I will be with you. That's it. I'm not sending you on an assignment and I'm going to sit in my office and watch you fail. I'm sending you. And I'm going along with you. Wow. The same God who later on said to the Israelites when Moses did get things together and accepted the position, or rather, accepted the assignment. Same God said to the people of Israel, the Hebrews, my presence is going with you. And then when Moses is not allowed to go into the promised land, I'm fast forwarding, but just to get you to hear that, the opening words of God in the book of Joshua, Moses' successor, certainly I will be with you, just like I was with Moses. Take that to your bank and deposit that this evening. I will be with you. And he added, and this shall be a sign to thee when you bring my people out of Egypt. You shall worship me on this mountain. If that verse doesn't do something to you, then check yourself. Because God speaks as though they're already in the promised land. He speaks beyond Moses' doubt. He speaks beyond Moses' unbelief. He speaks beyond Moses' insecurity, or plural insecurities, and lets him know you are the man for this job. You are the woman for this job. Yes, I said woman. It's time that we liberate all of God's people and let them be the persons that God has called them to be. Preacher, I need more. His promise is convincing, and his promise is enough. I will be with you. So you've got a choice to make. You can be paralyzed by fear and never step out, or never move to the next level, or never embrace this great and marvelous future that God has for you. Or you can continue to struggle. Yes, I say struggle. Because I am a personal witness. God will tear down the walls of your house if there's a calling inside of you to shake you up, to get you to move, to get you to obey, to get you to subject yourself to the calling that's on your life. My closing question this evening is, will you have the confidence in you, in yourself? Will you have the confidence in yourself that God has in you? Now, you don't want to be overconfident, cocky, arrogant, but you want to have the confidence that God has in you. Will you rest in knowing that the God who created the heavens and earth, Yahweh, who said heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away? Will you rest in knowing that God said, come now, I am sending you to Pharaoh? I want to close the day by telling you again that God's confidence in you exceeds the confidence you have in yourself. God bless you, and thank you for joining us on this evening. May I pray with you? God, someone is listening. Someone has been heartbroken, wrestling with an assignment that they are for certain came from you. They've been asking themselves, taunting themselves with the questions that have not come from you, but the questions that have been at the center focus of the adversary. What if I can't? All the things that we've discussed. I'm not ready. I'm not good enough. I've got a record. I don't want to face rejection. God, I pray that you would speak to those individuals and let them know they may be disqualified according to man's standards, and that's perfectly okay, because I heard you say approved. 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 That you have preserved their lives for such a time as this. And you already have things in place, people in place, to help to usher them into the next move of God. God, help them rest in knowing that you said, I will be with you. You're not sending someone else. You don't have a substitute to stand in for you. You are indeed God. In fact, in my own words, when Moses asked you to take out your ID, when he asked you, whom shall I tell them that sent me? You said, tell them that I am sent you. And that's enough. You are indeed the great I am. Thank you, God. Thank you for seeing in us what we don't often see in ourselves. Thank you for the giftedness that you placed in rejects, misfits, people that the world and some churches would say, you can't do anything in here. I suggest you find somewhere else to go. But you are saying this evening, welcome to the kingdom of God. I have an assignment for you. Bless us. Keep us. And help us to receive these words into our spirit and begin on the long and tedious journey that you have ahead of us. Thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you again for joining us. Have a good evening.